If you're thinking about moving to Phoenix, there are a few suburbs that buyers seem to gravitate towards almost immediately. They show up over and over again in online searches, they're recommended constantly on Facebook groups, and they're talked about as if they were the obvious choice. And because of that, a lot of buyers assume that choosing one of these suburbs is the safe move. It just feels logical. If everyone's pointing to the same areas, they must be good. If they're popular, they must be working for most people. If they're recommended again and again, they must be the safest option. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about very much. Some of these same suburbs are also the ones buyers quietly leave later on. Not right away, not dramatically, and not usually publicly. It happens quietly after the excitement wears off and daily life starts to settle in. And when buyers leave, they rarely say why out loud. Not because something went wrong, but because admitting you chose the wrong location is just uncomfortable. It feels like admitting you missed something important. It feels like admitting you made a decision based on how something looked instead of how something actually worked. Today, I want to talk to you about why this keeps happening and what buyers constantly underestimate before they move, and how to avoid choosing a suburb that looks perfect on paper but slowly becomes a source of frustration later on. This isn't about attacking specific cities or telling you where you shouldn't live. It's about understanding the patterns we see time and time again with people relocating here to the Phoenix area. And some of what I'm about to tell you may go against what you've already heard online. Let's start with how most people choose where they want to move. Most buyers begin their Phoenix area search online. They look at price, they look at square footage, and they look at how new everything appears. They scroll through listings late at night and they compare photos side by side. They imagine what life might feel like in that space. And certain suburbs immediately start to stand out because they offer what feels like a better deal. More house, more features, more space. It feels logical. Why wouldn't you choose the place where your budget goes further? Why wouldn't you want the newer home, the bigger lot, the cleaner street? But here's where we start to get controversial. More house for the money is one of the most misleading ideas in real estate in general. Not because it's false, but because it's incomplete. It only tells you what you're gaining, not what you're giving up in return. What buyers gain in square footage, they often give up in inconvenience, time, flexibility, and just daily ease. And those trade-offs don't show up on a pretty listing photo. The Phoenix area is not a compact city. Distance here matters more than people expect, and it affects your life in ways that aren't obvious during a short visit. A 10-minute difference on a map doesn't feel like much when you're planning a move. But when that 10 minutes becomes part of your daily routine, it just compounds. It affects when you wake up, when you get home, and how often you even leave the house. One of the biggest reasons buyers leave certain suburbs is the commute fatigue. That drive that felt manageable when you were looking at it on Google Maps becomes part of your daily life. Morning after morning, afternoon after afternoon. At first, it feels fine. Buyers tell themselves they'll adjust. They assume it's just temporary, and they think it's just part of the transition. But over time, that extra distance starts shaping everything. You wake up earlier than you wanted to. You arrive home later than you planned. You stop doing things you used to enjoy during the week. Running a quick errand doesn't feel quick anymore. Meeting friends starts to feel like a commitment instead of something spontaneous. You begin stacking errands together just to avoid getting back into the car again. And eventually, buyers realize something important. The house isn't the issue, it's the location. Here's the part most people don't like to admit. Most buyers don't leave these suburbs because something went wrong. They leave because life didn't get easier after the move. Another factor buyers consistently underestimate is how heat interacts with the daily life and location. Phoenix heat is unavoidable, but how you experience it depends heavily on where you live. Some suburbs have mature landscaping, shaded streets, and a shorter distance between your everyday destinations. Others are newer, more spread out, and far more exposed. That difference doesn't show up in the pretty listing photos, but it does show up in daily life. It shows up when you walk from your car to the store. It shows up when you're trying to unload groceries. And it shows up when every errand feels more like effort than it should. Buyers often say they didn't realize how much the heat would affect their daily routines in the summer. They assumed all of Phoenix was the same. It isn't. And here's something that rarely gets said out loud. Heat changes your behavior. People avoid unnecessary trips. They stay home more. They plan their days around exposure and travel time. When your location requires longer drives and more exposure, that friction just compounds. Over time, buyers feel less free, not more. Another area where expectations and realities don't line up is HOA restrictions. At first, HOA rules feel reasonable. Most buyers assume they'll never run into an issue. They skim the rules, they sign the paperwork, and then they move on. But as time passes and life changes, these rules start to feel more limiting. Many buyers didn't realize they're buying into a lifestyle that only works if nothing changes down the road. As long as routines stay the same, the neighborhood will feel fine. But life rarely stays the same. When work schedules change, when family needs shift, when flexibility becomes important, the location doesn't adapt with you. And that's okay. Convenience is another factor buyers don't think about enough. Some suburbs are peaceful because they're far from everywhere. The peace feels appealing at first. It's quiet, it's calm, and it feels like an escape. But driving for groceries, doctor appointments, schools, activities, and just basic errands start to become exhausting over time. What feels peaceful starts to feel isolating. And eventually, buyers realize that peace comes at a cost of that convenience. Here's the pattern we see over and over again. Buyers choose suburbs based on how impressive they look, not how functional they are. They prioritize curb appeal over daily life. They choose what photographs well instead of what actually works well. And that approach works for a short season. But if your goal is long-term comfort, flexibility, less stress, some of the most hyped areas are going to fall short. And here's the most part people don't want to hear. Popularity doesn't equal livability. The buyers who are the happiest long-term in Phoenix don't chase hype. They ask the harder questions. They come to us as realtors. They ask, how does a normal weekday feel here? How much driving does my daily life actually require? How flexible will this location be if life changes down the road? These questions matter more than the square footage. If you're relocating to the Phoenix area and want to help seeing past the hype before committing, reach out to us. This is exactly what we help buyers navigate every single day. And getting this part right can mean the difference between loving your move and quietly planning your exit a few short years later.